started, just to review our agenda before we launch into it, and hi to the folks who might be watching online. Good to have you with us. We'll begin with review and approval of minutes from our last meeting. Then we'll go into old business, kicking off with a conversation about site visit reflections and upcoming site visits. And then looking at next steps in the funding process and where we sit in terms of the funding application, guidelines, and scoring matrix. From there, we'll move into new business. We'll get a presentation on the performance review and the dashboard, which I know everyone's been very excited about. And then we'll discuss next steps in the months ahead. If there is public comment or anyone interested in making public comment, please sign up. There's a sheet over there, and just get up to 3 minutes, and we'll kind of do some timekeeping based on whether or not we have folks sign up for public comment. If we could begin, please review your drafted minutes, and let's see if there's a motion for approval. Motion to approve? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All against, please say nay. Okay, the minutes are approved. We'll move on now to site visits. And Rashida, thank you so much, first of all, for organizing and chaperoning us. I've had a blast on the few I've gotten to attend. We've had fire drills, we've gotten to see playtime, it's been very exciting. I'll turn things over to you, but we wanted to kick things off with some space for folks to reflect on what they've been seeing, experiencing, hearing, and then talking about what comes next.
Yeah. So I would encourage everyone to reflect on the visits. I think it's very important they enjoy folks coming out to the site visits. We had one this morning at Alida. Leslie and Dr. Mims came to that one this morning. And I had a card for you guys.
Yes, you did. We went on wheels.
So it's just been a great experience hearing some of the barriers and what can we learn from this. And I can't tell you that, and I have to say this, early childhood education teachers need to be paid better.
Amen.
Yes.
It goes without saying.
Amen.
And just the love and support that they have for our kiddos are amazing. And I am so happy that we have this committee, a committee of strong advocates for our kids here. I think in your package you have our current site visits. We have one coming up on, okay, so I can pass this out again. And I always encourage to have at least three people coming out. We had 2 today, and Leslie and Dr. Mims asked some great questions. So please be supportive of this. We have some this week, we have 2, 3 next week, and then Buchan County Partnership for Children will have theirs January the 9th at 9 o'clock. So if you can please attend that, please come to it.
Any other reflections? Thank you so much for kicking us off. Any other reflections that folks have had a chance to take part in?
Yeah, it was wonderful to see, as I said, where the rubber meets the road, you know, and to see the tangible results of the grants, to see the enthusiasm, the excitement of the recipients, the way that they have thoughtfully applied the grant monies. It was helpful to hear about barriers, yes, and understand how the pieces fit together. So, you know, the needs sort of relate, and the solution becomes dependent on how those needs interrelate. So it helped me get a better understanding of the system as a whole. That system of service provision. It was fun.
Yeah.
I'm there with Siobhan today.
Rashida.
Rashida, my brain is fried. I'm sorry, I'm heading out of town. That every time I go to a child care center, I feel new motivation for doing what we do, and that happened again on the visits I've been able to do on. So, thank you. It was good to ask questions in the context of being there. Questions about the system and
Rashida said, but also for these directors that are able to go with the flow of this turbulent environment is just amazing. And it's interesting because perhaps they could learn a little bit from each other. And some may manage some things better than others, or some may have a sense of how to deal with certain types of children better than others, or notes on kids on a daily basis. Some may be doing a better job than others. And probably the Partnership for Children helps in conveying that and helping them share with each other. But it just occurred to me that maybe folks could learn from one another more deeply than maybe they're able to do now. And I don't know if that's our job so much, but I was just aware of it particularly today.
I would like to say that I think it really put a face on a variety of, we saw Owen students, we saw people who are benefiting from the program, but it also is a good reminder of how varied the path is and how the flexibility of some of these grants are benefiting some people to be able to reach their goals that in a typical setting would not be able to be met. So we saw an adult learner who's able to go back to school, but because she's a single mom, it's just taking longer. So this is giving her that ability, and it's very touching. I found it really inspiring just to reflect on, I mean, some folks in the room have been at the front lines of this for decades. It's been a focal point of the kind of crew of commissioners who were elected in 2016. And just thinking about the ways that the story is starting to change as we see the fund kind of coming to life and being put to work. As we, seeing different approaches being tested to building out parts of the workforce development pipeline, seeing resources around supporting kids exposed to trauma and the behavioral health needs, seeing support for new classrooms. 2 years ago when we were having these conversations, it was here, we need this and this and this and this and this and this. And now there's a long road ahead of us, but it was incredibly inspiring and motivating to see it in action, and just to hear just the level of expertise, the level of passion and love for the kiddos that was so clear from the directors and teachers that we interacted with.
I was impressed with just the level of commitment and dedication in spite of so many challenges and adversities. And I think seeing it in action just was so eye-opening. And I think one of the most beneficial questions was learning about, I was asked what are their barriers, and hearing about their barriers. And there were some definite, consistencies around staffing and just the even hearing about what they can pay their workers, and how many of the folks who are dedicating their lives to raising the next generation can't afford to care for their own kids. And that was just like, wow. But the level of commitment was wonderful. And as Leslie knows, I got a 3-year-old hug this morning. That was spontaneous too. Came from across the room. And Susan said that was worth it.
Any other comments, reflections, folks want to share? Okay, and
All I can say, it's just been a pleasure getting to know everyone, and this is a new field for me as well, and I've learned a lot, and I want to continue to be supportive of this committee. So what I'll do is send this around again, because we have one more new one with Buncombe County Partnership in January, and I'll get this at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Rashida, as I said, I thought I sent a.
You did, I did.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll send.
All right, I can't remember, I was gonna look at you and see what I said. Whatever I said.
Thank you.
great, well, thank you, Rashida, thank you, everyone, and thank you to host some of you are in the room with us today. Rachel, we'll turn things over to you to kick off our conversation. This is just a brief recap. This is a just the application itself. And thank you to everyone who took the time to put pen to paper and get some thoughts down, and to staff who synthesized those into the documents in front of you. In your packet, you'll find a couple documents. Rachel will walk us through these in depth, but just to get everyone oriented, you'll find a document that looks like this. It's called Draft Guidelines. It has the Buncombe County logo on the upper left-hand corner. You'll see a sort of plain formatted document that's the grant application. And then you'll see a larger doc that's the drafted scoring matrix. Our plan is that Rachel will walk us through what we've got here, and then we'll take about 20 or so minutes for thoughts, feedback, if there are ideas about ways to keep strengthening and improving this before it goes live in a few weeks.
The goal of this conversation is to get to a place where we can vote to approve these documents. We'll talk about timeline as part of this conversation, but I will lift up the next milestone in this grant timeline is that we will open up for applications on December 16th. That gives staff time to take this and bring it back and get it all entered into the software and begin, or continue, finalizing all of the steps needed to open this process up. If we, have any recommended changes as part of this discussion, we can, gauge whether they're, minor changes that we can all agree on right now and incorporate into a vote, or if there's anything more significant that we need to think about how to handle leaving this meeting via email or another meeting. So, keeping that in mind as framing. The most significant change from last process to this process in terms of the materials we're working with is splitting apart the grant guidelines and the grant application. That was some of the feedback that we heard from this committee, that it felt overwhelming or complicated to put all of that information into a grant application. That conversation was happening for some of our other grant programs here at the county, so we are looking to have a standardized grant guidelines template, which is what this is in, subject to change a little bit if the categories need to adjust, so that whether a nonprofit is looking at our affordable housing services program, our juvenile crime prevention program, aging services funding, early childhood, whatever, they would be able to navigate through and find the information that they're looking for about the overall grant program. So let's look at that first, the guidelines. Stop me at any time if you have a question. It begins with the purpose. This information has not changed from the last cycle. Funding, our dollar amount listed here is based on the resolution that the Board of Commissioners passed a year ago. The number that we're working with is $3,672,000 for FY21. Okay, you're over here.
Rachel, can I ask, so the goals that are here, I'm sorry, up there in the purpose still,
Yes.
are exactly the wording that we had previously? Because I thought we had a few little ideas about goals.
I will show you in the projects category where some of the new language came in, but I left the overall goals as is because they seemed to be longer lasting and could still serve as an umbrella. Tell me what you think when we get to section D under eligibility. So we'll go there next. It shows that organizations of any type are eligible to apply. There's language about public purpose. That is standard for all of our grant programs. Our county legal staff will review all our allocations to make sure that they're consistent with, what we as a county government are eligible or allowed to fund. C states that the application is required, that it will be through the online method and on time within the grant deadline. And then D, to answer your question, Leslie, is where we reflected that adjusted language about categories. The idea would be, when we get to the application, projects have to identify with one of the these 5 categories.
Can I make a suggestion there?
Yes.
So here it says that they would be allocated for the following purposes. And I think all of this is really, really good overall, and I think the changes y'all made are
We're
terrific.
feeling great about it.
But I would say here that you ought to call these maybe something other than purposes, because in the application, you go back to calling them goals. So if I were, my suggestion would be to say here that funding will be allocated for projects using the following strategies.
Yeah,
What does the group think about that?
Yeah.
yeah, that's good.
And these are so that when you get to the application on the first page, where instead of where it says goal served, you could just say strategy. And then you could say select a strategy that most closely aligns with this project. And then then it seems to really fit. And you don't have that crossing language between purpose, goal, and that sort of thing. That was that would help me, I think.
And to that point of alignment, so on the goals, it says in the second bullet, increase availability, I wrote here, blah, 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 with an emphasis on pre-K programs. But then when we get over here, the emphasis on pre-K is not reiterated. And, I mean, if we're saying an emphasis on pre-K, that is a very specific thing, and to me, that means 4-year-olds and maybe a few 3-year-olds. So it's not birth to 3, really. It's really preparation for entering kindergarten. Unless others have another definition, and I'm willing to hear that. But I think if we're gonna be that specific, then we need to call it out in the strategies. Or else not be that specific. But then I think the commissioners maybe were the ones that came up with the goals.
Well, that really originated in the report that we got from ABPPC, the findings of that, which recommended strong
Right.
investment in 3- and 4-year-old classrooms, but recognized that we needed to work at the whole upstream birth to 3 as well. So how we best capture that and then make sure it's mirrored throughout, I think is the question on the table. And maybe it's just adding a little phrase of, with an emphasis on pre-K, but inclusive of.
The problem is, of course, we're so, needy of infant and toddler slots.
Well, this funding can be used for that, and maybe what I hear you saying is if there's language used in both places that captures, there's an emphasis on pre-K and and applications that provide, this isn't the way we phrase it, maybe Phil or
Or do
someone.
we say before kindergarten? To get that, I get your point and understand your point about pre-K being a very specific thing. And yet we've said high quality early childhood care right before that, so we're.
Well, to me, that's children that are 0 to 5. Early childhood education development fund is children 0 to 5 to me, and I think that it said that in the
And it is.
legislation, I think.
Yeah.
And that's great, but if we're gonna have a goal of pre-K, then our strategies need to be pre-K. And I'm not sure I mean, I get that, and I agree with where we ended up with ABPPC, but we started there with ABPPC. We intentionally did not deal with 0 to 3 in that process.
Is the concern sort of more of a technical one that under subsection D number 1 include with an emphasis on pre-K so that the language is identical? Or is the concern that you want to make sure that language is accurately expansive so that in both places it says there's an emphasis on pre-K and we will accept applications for birth through 3 or birth through 4?
I prefer the more expansive, just because, again, we know we have all these incredibly difficult needs.
I never read pre-K in this to mean just the 2 years. I always thought that pre-K meant 0 to 5.
Well,
I didn't mean NC pre-K.
Remember
which is
the first
4-year-old.
meeting we had, and I said, let's define our terms.
Yeah.
Because people do
Well,
have
let's,
different ways they interpret these words, and it's very important that we be on the same page.
well, the intent that was captured in the resolution is derived directly from the ABPPC findings and recommendations, which is that there's significant investment in pre-K defined as serving 4-year-olds, some 3-year-olds, but 4-year-olds on the last step before kindergarten. But that the local system needs to also be responsive to the birth through age 3 needs. So that's kind of where the intent was, and maybe what we can do is just craft some language that captures that intent, and then appears both under the first bullet under goals and then under subsection D number 1, so that there's consistency there. Does that speak to the?
I think so. Obviously, we want to see it in words, but, yeah,
But I
that's
think
it.
to Leslie's point, pre-K is a very specific identifier. It's very specific. And when you use the word NC pre-K with our applicants,
Right,
it is very specific, so.
exactly.
And I don't think we're using that. I think we're just trying to reinforce for folks that people who are used to navigating a true labyrinth of funding, this is actually a much more open funding process that will fund birth through 5, broader, yeah, but there will be that focus on 3 and 4.
I think because before the site visits and before like immersing myself here, I would have, I definitely saw the need across the board 0 to 5. After the visits, it really landed on me through the dialogue with the providers, how difficult that NC pre-K is, because that's where we heard because of the regulations and the cost and the difficulty in hiring teachers.
The BK requirement.
The pre-K requirements, that was what I heard was a huge struggle. So it actually makes me think differently about the wording now to say maybe that's why it, came through as a specific recommendation. So, I kind of like keeping the emphasis, on there while we're still gonna look at funding the way we did across the whole spectrum, but that is a particular challenge that I heard from my visits. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but,
I'll speak up obviously I work for NC Pre-K and I'm a mentor and evaluator for them. And so I would be glad to give you some feedback from some more research on that, and have a talk with you about that later. I apologize if some people have, but I agree that NC Pre-K is very specific to funding. And so if preschools are hearing that, it is a very narrow, so I agree, I think the term needs to be broader than just NC Pre-K, but I do agree with that.
What about this? Bullet number 2 under goals. Increase the availability of high quality early childhood care and education. Inserting these new terms. For children birth through age 5, with an emphasis on pre-K programs. Now inserting some more language, serving rising kindergartners.
That's great. And then have it in every place where, instead of just in one.
So far, the every place that I can think to put it is number 1 under projects, which is on the top of the 2nd page.
And on the application.
Where would it go in the application? Do you want to?
Under strategy.
On the first
goal.
page, under strategy.
Oh, on the application.
Right now it says goal served in the first page.
Just to be consistent.
Number 1, we just need on the application itself.
Using the
Yeah.
same terminology, deciding on strategy.
To Rachel on page 1 of the
Got it.
Yeah, page 1.
Okay, so then what would the language be then under projects on page 2?
The same language.
The same language as what you
But
just
maybe
said for goals?
considering strategies compared to projects.
And this is semantics, but would you consider outcomes instead of strategies? Strategies are a specific plan in my mind. Is that what you're wanting?
I would say strategy because, but, we can spend about an hour here doing that.
I know.
This strategy tells you how you're gonna get at it. An outcome might be, an outcome of a grant dealing with a strategy of creating classrooms, an outcome might be, we created one new classroom. But the strategy is creating classrooms, an outcome is what specifically are you gonna do once you enact that strategy? The
What are
only
the
question I have
results,
with
really?
Rachel's language is, it says rising kindergartners. And those of you who have more subject matter expertise would have to tell me whether that would tell an applicant that this would not serve 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds because they may not be rising kindergartners.
Or
That's
setting the
written.
cutoff date.
Right, so I think we gotta be careful. Maybe-
Rachel, why did you add the rise in kindergarten?
I suggested that we add the first insert for children birth through age 5 to make sure that people are clear that it's inclusive of the entire spectrum, I think, and so I suggested the second edition because there was a sense that we weren't sure what we meant by pre-K.
Maybe we say 4 and 5-year-olds.
I landed on rising kindergarten because I hear from providers that they do the kind of cohort model, but rather than age, the school system is when you've got to turn a certain age by a certain time in the year.
And they don't all participate in a labeled NC pre-K program. So they
Right.
can be rising kindergartners and not go through the NC pre-K.
My recollection was when we were talking about this with the preschool planning collaborative, there was a 3-year-old age that was even rolled up into it
There
because
is.
of that age.
There is
Okay.
a.
Okay, that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
So 3 places that would get added.
So the application here under goals, and what was the third, Rachel?
On the grant guidelines document,
Yes,
page 1,
okay,
purpose,
Yes.
bullet 2. Page 2, projects, item 1. On the application, page 1, under a goal, which is becoming a strategy, item 1.
okay. Thank you.
There was also, while we're looking at the project section, talking about the strategies, we clarified some language on item 2, since the last meeting, to show that this is in support of capacity and or quality for existing programs. That wasn't really clearly spelled out prior, and that was one of the things that we've been hearing in conversations with committee members and with providers at site visits, that everything, services and programs are quite tenuous to maintain, and we could be creating unintended consequences if we focus only on expansion. And so wanting to make it clear that existing, using that word existing programs, would be eligible to apply for the fund. Workforce, support for families, and then item 5, there was a tweak in the language here, enhancing the effectiveness of the overall system of early care education. And that language was added so that it's clear. We had a public comment from Amy, at the last meeting, asking, does advocacy fit? We want to make it clear that an advocacy project or any other project that's working across programs at the system level would be eligible. Ready to talk timeline?
Yes.
I just want to clarify, we are on one more, this year again, we're gonna restrict capital to the schools.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't call that out
That's okay, I just
specifically.
wanted to.
Item F, under the section where we were on eligibility, we've gotten final, decision on this, that capital, projects should be restricted to the schools.
And that means the Buncombe County schools and the Asheville City schools,
Correct.
not a private school.
The public school systems.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
Okay,
May I ask a question?
yes.
If, for example, we wanted to work on a daycare center at AD Tech to train, to really enhance our ability terms of that potential.
That would be great.
It would,
Yeah, it's probably dollars, but the school systems,
We might just need to get a legal opinion on whether community colleges will qualify as public school systems. This is this one area, not to belabor the point, this is this one area that's sort of the potentially moving target as interpretations of statutes evolve. And Buncombe has the exciting role of being one of the counties that's trying to figure that out, so. This is where we landed as of now, but I
Of
think
course.
those questions would go to lawyers and they would let us know their reading of that, I think, Rachel.
So it's not written as for this year, it's written as not eligible. So that there's not a sense that what we did last year was leave it sort of open-ended to be revisited. And so our nonprofit partners are sort of waiting to hear whether or not capital will be eligible. So we wanted to leave it more closed in that way. Okay.
Rachel, I know we said that it says multi-year request to be considered, and I know we talked about this last year, but we're not really committing to, I mean, where did we land on what to do with multi-year?
It seemed like we didn't land anywhere in terms of a vote. I heard interest, in accepting applications for multi-year funding. And we can take a look in the application when we get there, the method that we gather that information through. But it sounded like we didn't feel ready to commit.
There was concern about getting locked in and not being nimble and flexible to new ideas.
And I guess I'm thinking about the applications, the way I read them, last year, and for agencies who thought they were applying for multi-year funding, are they then at a disadvantage if we're not funding their multi-years because they said they would produce these outcomes in, many years, and we don't really know what they're gonna do with a year? So I don't know if there's a way to give, if we're not gonna commit to multi-year funding, to give guidance to people in the application process that be very clear what you'll do with a year.
Okay.
If you don't get multi-year, just so they're not at a disadvantage.
That makes sense. Let's take a look when we get there and see if it aligns with what you're thinking. So timeline, this is important. Application opens December 16th. We will talk later in this meeting about a community engagement session. Hopefully we can nail that down in the next week or so. We have set a date for the grant writing workshop, which will, there's more information on that when we get to the application process section. So January 18th would be a workshop that's optional for applicants. That's a Saturday. They would be invited to come here and spend time with staff and then the committee will be here, learning about the application process.
Is there a time set for that?
There is. Under section Roman numeral 5, it lists that it will be held from 10 o'clock to 11:30 on Saturday, January 18th in this room. The application would be due by February 14th, that's a Friday at 5 p.m. So open for a couple of months for the applicants. Here's the real change from last year's process. Our committee must have its grant recommendations, that's the who's funded and at what level, to the county budget office by April 24th. That is sooner than we were hoping for. It's in alignment with the new county manager's budget message, which will be delivered to the Board of Commissioners on May 19th. As part of your packet that evening, Commissioners, there will be that full list. The county manager also wants to make sure that that information is made available to the public in the pre-meeting. Our practice is to have a meeting 2 weeks prior to a regular meeting in which the you about what's coming at their next meeting. So we're asked to have that available for Agro to present to the Board of Commissioners in her May 5th pre-meeting with you. And therefore, April 24th, backing it up so that the budget office has enough time to get it compiled into the budget message, we would deliver it by April 24th. That gives us a couple of months to move through the review process. The balance is, do we wanna have a longer time for applicants to prepare and submit their applications, or a longer time for the grant review committee to do sort of reviewing applications?
Last time, how many weeks did we have?
It was roughly 2 months, was it?
For the review
For us to
process?
review them?
2 weeks.
Somebody,
Yeah, right.
somebody sitting
Yeah.
behind me,
Two
can
months.
somebody sitting behind me tell me when the application was due last year? We'll come back to that. We'll look at
Don't
it.
want it to be as fast as last year.
I think it was due in April. I think it opened in February, maybe.
It seemed really fast and was hard to get it all in.
Right.
Furthermore, I will note that we were developing our review process at that time. So we've got the confidence of knowing, ahead of time when the application opens, what the scoring criteria are gonna be. This committee isn't changing, so we will all have used the software before, and we will have a smoother process.
Still a lot.
But if the committee did wanna make any adjustments, given this new deadline,
Now is the time.
now is the time, and it would need to be on the application deadline. So we would need to make the application due, would open December 16th, and we could decide to make it due early in February 14th.
We could.
Is that something you folks would wanna look at?
I think this is reasonable, I just would
Thank you.
shorten it. I think we.
It's more than less.
I mean, essentially, the folks aren't gonna be able to really start writing and stuff until January.
Right.
And so I don't see how you could do it in really.
About 6 weeks max to
Yeah,
write.
6 weeks. The thing that I think is important about that is we're encouraging collaboration and partnerships and, you know, joint submittals, I think. And it takes a while to work through all that with your own board of directors and all the players.
Lots of parts and pieces.
Yeah, yeah. And I think those are stronger projects potentially.
And we can start reading on the 17th.
We will get to work on the 17th, it's already on our calendars, and push the applications right out to all our grant reviews. We are proposing the same timeframe for the strategic partnership grant process, which I brought flyers. That's another grant process that the county runs, which is for nonprofit organizations. Rather than the commissioners making those grant decisions directly this year, we're gonna have a committee of community members who make those grant allocations, and we're using this, proposing the same deadlines for both committees. Is there a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Wondering if the grant review meetings are needing to be open meetings?
They are. We can set some ground rules at the beginning, as we head into those grant review meetings to help us, as staff, as committee members, and as members of the public who are in the room, manage those meetings as best as possible, but they've got to be open.
Agree to things that are a little tight last time.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to set those ground.
Make sure we have a gavel when we open.
We have a chair.
The royal we.
And vice chair.
You can pass the gavel around.
Who doesn't have a gavel? Should get one.
I'm bringing a hammer.
I want to point something out that's unrelated to the timeline in the next section, because it relates. Are there any timeline recommended changes before we go on?
Did you happen to get the dates for how much time we had last year? I just would like to be able to know that in my head.
The application closed on April 19th, and the funding decisions were made on June 6th.
April 19th or June 6th?
And that feels like a lot longer
I
than it
know, it
was.
is.
will have our March and our April regularly scheduled meetings. It's on the agenda, at the end of agenda, when we look at coming months. We don't need to decide it today, but we may want to consider adding another meeting. So that we've got three.
Because actually our April meeting would be whatever the first Tuesday of April is.
It'll be early in the month.
Yeah, so if we wanted to maybe pencil in anticipating of.
And we've got presentations for finalists to schedule. So I think another, like a long meeting would be necessary.
Maybe the first meeting of April would be presentations, and then we have a final decision-making meeting
Yeah.
prior to the 24th.
I don't know if the presentations are that late in the cycle. I don't know, I guess, I don't know if it's better,
Yeah.
I guess if we will have had a chance to review, that's probably good.
What we had said was if we could, do narrowing down on the scoring into two categories, those that are advancing to the final round and those that aren't.
I
And
appreciate
staff
that.
are doing that?
It's for the committee.
Committee will be based on our ranking.
So potentially.
We really have to do our work then between
So
the
potentially.
17th and April 2nd or 1st or whatever it is.
So one sequence for that would be, we start reading February 17th, our first meeting of March. We would come with initial scoring completed, and we'd be able to sift finalists from those who wouldn't be advancing. First meeting of April, we have finalist presentations, and then we'd schedule an additional April meeting for final decisions.
So it's
There's one
really
sequence we can look
the
at.
same amount of time then, 2 weeks for us to review.
Another
That's
option.
a long time.
Another option is to choose, rather than full scoring, those, your top projects, to go into category A, category B, advancing or not advancing, rather than do the scoring as a community.
Maybe staff can offer us some guidance about, and the committee members, about different ways to sort of approach that.
We will.
process.
Will the committee keeping the timelines as is? On the application process, there's some new language here added based on feedback from the committee at your last meeting. Staff is available to provide basic one-on-one support to applicants by request. And will also work to match applicants with other community-based grant writing resource support if needed. So that leaves us open to sit and work with applicants if they are interested, and your level of support is doable, and if they're interested in needing some matchmaking, we can offer to do some of that with them. In addition, it makes a note here that staff do not participate in the grant scoring process, and states that applicants are asked not to communicate with review committee members regarding their applications outside of the regular committee meeting structure. That was based on some feedback from the committee during our process of talking about what went well and what was hard about the grant cycle last time.
Can I make a suggestion in that top section?
Yes.
Just a typo, second paragraph, a grant writing workshop. And should you switch the order of paragraphs 1 and 2, just to make them chronologically, so nobody gets,
Everyone okay with that?
so you're dealing with workshop first and then the application.
Yeah, that's good.
We state here that language interpretation and translation is available by request. I would follow the lead of the committee's interest on this. We want to be as open and as accessible as possible. And no organizations placed a Spanish language application last year. The organization that we worked with that had Spanish speakers also had English speakers and preferred to submit their application in English. If we think that it's a worthwhile time and expense, we can do both translating and interpreting as well as outreach in Spanish.
You can offer that.
You want to offer it or the process for reviewing and who does it, okay? Number 8, at the very bottom, review process. Talks about the standardized tool that you'll be using and the categories that are in that. The criteria that will be considered are the same criteria, the same number of, those mirror the application questions once those are scored to.
Can I, I'm sorry, following criteria will be used by the committee. I see organization need project, put down at budget is number 9 on the scoring sheet.
Uh-oh,
And then you said scale up, but on
Got
the
it.
bottom of the sheet, you've got sustainability.
thank you for catching that.
And I thought we talked about trying to compress some of these, but we weren't able to.
We've compressed quite significantly, and we can flip over to the application. If you have ideas for further compression, I would just reflect that back this way.
No,
So-
not necessarily, but I thought you said these are exactly what we had last time.
These are not a good one.
Okay.
Rachel, a quick time check, it's about 10 to 2. How do you want the committee to proceed? And
We've been doing fairly in-depth feedback. What would be best for you and staff as we make sure we have enough time for performance review?
Let's wrap this up
Yep.
within the next 5 minutes, and if we can't, then let's figure out what our next plan is gonna be.
Okay.
For either development or product review,
We've gotta have this if we're.
or bumping the performance review. That would be
Okay.
another option. So on the application, thank you to the committee for your discussion, both right after the last funding process and in your last meeting. Thank you to Philip and Jane who both submitted, edits. It was a real pleasure to go through and simplify the language. Jane, you offered some great, suggestions on how to do that. The structure and format for this application is that at the very beginning, the project will select their strategy and tell us how much funding is being requested for the upcoming fiscal year FY '21. Then they'll proceed to a set of 10 questions. And they're notified here that responses will be scored by the grant committee and each is worth 10% of the final score.
So they can only choose one strategy?
One strategy.
What if their project is multiple, and we had some this past year that were,
The idea would be that the applicant organization selects the one that they think is the strongest. And staff might need to, when we get them all in, organize and group. Say we have 2 programs that are almost exactly alike and they pick different strategies. We might move one over so they can be considered together. The flow of these questions, some of them were combined. For example, the ones that were around outcomes and outputs and results, that's all one question. That happened in several cases. We've got organization, need for the project, a description of the project itself, who the project is serving, the results of the project, evaluation, equity, collaboration, budget, and then sustainability. Thanks for pointing that out. That was a last-minute swap out, but the sustainability question was feeling more relevant than the scale question. After those questions, there's a section at the end for optional information. This was, Dr. Mims, how we decided to propose handling the multi-year or partial funding request. Rather than ask the group to provide the entire budget for additional years, allow information to be presented about what would be accomplished for years 2 and or 3 and or 2, including what milestones and why it would be needed to have more time to accomplish those goals. They can also add information about resource support, scale up, and then other. Last year we had requests that for groups that wanted to attach or provide recommendation letters of support, flyers, other supplemental information. Now there will be ways that that can go. think that was me trying to put a smart page break in and then not being smart after working in it.
Gotcha.
The scoring criteria, it still feels like a lot of information for people, for whom this type of grid can be overwhelming, but it simplifies it to a 5-point instead of a 10-point system, because we were saying what's the difference between a 1 and a 2.
You can change that at the end. So it's on a scale of 1 to 10, just change that to 1 to 5.
Got it. I'm so glad you did it. You did it.
Mr. Secretary serves us so capably.
Our cross-departmental staff team took a look at the language here, with the plain language, sort of simple language in mind, as well as all of the advice from the committee around prioritizing, what seems most important about the project, and not prioritizing the sort of quality of the writing or grammar or some of those other items that had made an appearance in the last scoring tool.
Rachel, can I ask one more question? I promise. It actually goes back to page 4 of the guidelines.
Yes.
Under performance contracts, my guess is that this is all required by the county, and county rules and things. I notice that there's no extension available,
Ah,
so that if you don't spend all of your money, you have to return it by June 30th. And so that's one part of the question. And the second part is, the next paragraph talks about the various insurances that are required. I don't know how expensive those are, but I wondered if that paragraph, so the extension is one thing, and the next paragraph, does that limit who will apply?
so I will say that in answer to your first, part A, great point. Let's add a note that says requests for extensions will be considered on a case-by-case
I
basis.
think that'd be great.
Because
That came up in our site visit.
we do have that ability. It is not standard practice. This is designed to be a 1-year grant. But we do have that ability.
On the, we ready to go to another?
No, I got the second half of it, which is about insurances. Is it related to the insurance?
Now I'm back over here to the,
Okay, one moment.
Where is the insurance question, I'm sorry? It's on page 4, under performance contracts.
third paragraph.
It is all quite standard, and it's helpful that we disclose this at the very beginning, because it may limit those who apply. And we should make people aware at the very beginning so they can ask us questions about those things.
Yes.
One idea that I thought of as you were asking that might be helpful to add is that these are allowable expenses and can be built into the grant budget.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I
that-
think that would make a difference.
Absolutely.
Under the who can apply section, the eligibility, it says nonprofits and private businesses, so this is not just limited to not-for-profit agencies, right? And then on the performance contracts, at the bottom of page 4, it says, in addition to standard contract expectations or positions for business for the county, nonprofits receiving grant funds must also, it just says nonprofits.
Those
Is
are
that something
additional
that's-
financial assurances that as a county we require for nonprofit organizations.
But not for private business.
It's not required of every one of those businesses.
Okay, that's just.
It is atypical. Most grant programs are for nonprofits. And it is at the front end in establishing the fund and the grant process determines that is limiting, and what we want
results, number 5 here, to me, this is one of the most, if not the most important of the 10. You know, what is it you're gonna do to help us reach our goals? And we talk here a lot of specifics about if you're gonna create slots. And even more so when the application or the guidelines, we get into detail. You know, we say here results and then coding, what results do you hope to achieve? I'm wondering, and then you say be specific about how much impact. Wonder if there's some language there that would get us to either how are you going to help us reach the goals that the commission have set that are on the front of the guidelines, or define results or define impact, because results are not just how many slots you're gonna create, really.
And it's
They're
leaving out those other goals.
all the
Yeah.
other things that people are gonna think to do. And we really need to know, because I think that's where the rubber really meets the road, is in terms of what are you going to achieve? So I don't have any edits right now, but I think this warrants a little more thinking and a little more, maybe our wordsmiths could help.
I mean, maybe if you said something like, be specific about how much, about what impact the project will have in line with the stated
Stated
goals.
five
strategies
goals
or five strategies
or
five-
goals.
or
I mean,
results.
to me, results is you're getting to the goals.
Yeah.
Strategies, you're getting to how you're gonna do it.
Right. And in line with the
Results,
county's-
you're trying to intrude on some very difficult things that we've set up that we want to achieve with this money.
Right, in line with the county's 5 stated goals. or something
Right.
like that. Yeah. I think that'd be great.
I mean, how you, just like this one with the system, you know, how you describe how you're going to get results in 1 year in changing a system is a really interesting thing to read what people say. Extremely difficult to do, and we need to know how they perceive that.
Yep, and we can, under, for projects requesting funding for slots, we can say also would include, so they're not thinking that that's instead.
Right.
Any other thoughts on the application or the scoring sheet?
Is there gonna be a budget template?
Yes.
So that's gonna be there this year. Thank you very much.
And when you see the reports, if you haven't
Okay.
already, put one of the organization's, quarterly, monthly, regular reports that they're generating. There's a budget form on the back where they're tracking their spending and reporting
Okay,
back to
great.
us. That's what we're thinking is becoming the basis for the template that's in the application.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Let's do a quick time and temp check here. Rachel, have you gotten us through?
We're all the way through, if the group is ready to vote, we're ready to get
Okay.
back into it now.
Great.
I have one more quick question. I'm just on the, the 10 different items. I can't remember, are they all equally weighted?
Yes.
Really? And that's
They're all
all
worth 10%, right?
As currently structured, we can do weighting and it adds a lot of complexity. We heard loud and clear from applicants, we also heard loud and clear from members of the committee, that it was simple, that we can do it better.
Will the applicants have access to this?
Yeah. It's already online.
Great.
Okay. Not proposing any changes.
That was really helpful. It felt like we were, going through lots of details, but the input all along throughout the process has been great. And staff is feeling strong about where we're at with these 3 documents.
Okay, great. And do we require any kind of vote, or is this
I would
kind of
like for us
admin?
to vote.
A vote? Okay, great. Just quick
And whatever.
I think we gave permission, right, for you guys to do some.
I can read out what the changes are if you want, but
No, no,
as
no.
I mean, I
just
suggest
go
that,
one by one, I made sure that we had the.
yeah, can we suggest the language of approval of the grant and
These three documents.
These three documents, thank you, with the changes that have been discussed during this meeting and that staff have documented?
Yes.
Yes, do we have a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, great, we have unanimous approval. Thank you everyone for great work on that. Do we have time to do introduction to performance review, and then we need to reserve, we have one person who will comment, so we need to reserve 2 minutes at the end, which is 2:26 about.
I think it would be great.
I probably need about 20 minutes to get through the whole thing.
Great.
That doesn't leave much time for discussion afterwards, though, but.
Well, let's get going. Let's do
Okay.
it,
All right,
and then
sure.
we'll carry this conversation forward.
Okay.
Great, thank you so much.
Can do. All right, so due to some technical challenges, I'm going to sit in the back of the room and talk to you all from back here. So I'll try and talk loud and project, and we'll go from there. All right, so the topic of discussion is going to be kind of an overview of the mechanisms and processes that we put in place for capturing performance, specifically of the grantees, but at a system level of the fund itself. Okay, so really we're going to talk about two different types of measures. We're going to talk about population level measures, which are sort of like at a macro level. They help tell the story of how effective the collaborative efforts of the fund have been. And we're going to talk about program level measures, which are specific to each grantee, and they help explain how a grantee is performing compared to the goals specified in their contract. So when we look at the program level or the grantee performance measures, each grantee has specific measures based on their contract, what they're going to be providing in alignment with the funding that they have received. We've established a quarterly process for gathering that data and then reporting that data back out. And the dashboard that we're going to see here shortly is the platform for reflecting that performance. Some of the measures that are incorporated in each of the grantees' reporting portfolio, for example, number of slots, classrooms created, students served, and so forth. As I indicated, each grantee has their own portfolio of measures that they're responsible for. However, there is some overlap or some commonality across the spectrum of grantees in relation to the specific measures. Okay, so what you guys see here, this is an image of the dashboard itself. So dashboard lives at the Early Childhood Education site, and we're going to give you guys a quick demo of that in a second, but just a brief overview of what the dashboard itself contains. So each grantee has a page within the dashboard, and we've identified anywhere from 3 to 6 of the most impactful key performance indicators for that given grantee. The data is reflected, or the visuals show year-to-date performance compared to an annual goal, and each grantee's dashboard has a project description, the grant amount, and there's also a link to the quarterly report, which contains supplemental performance indicators as well as a financial budget summary as well too. So I'm going to jump over onto the website real quick, and I'll show you guys where this lives. So the dashboard itself, I'm at the Early Childhood Education site. So here we go, right? And it's parked the whole way down near the bottom. So all you do to access this, and this is public facing, so anybody can access this. So all you do is click on this link, and it'll take you to the dashboard. Hopefully. Okay, so this is the landing page for the dashboard. So you can see here are the links to each of the given grantees' specific page within the dashboard. The visuals themselves look like this here, and they're, as I indicated earlier, they reflect year-to-date performance. So right now, the data reflected in the dashboard is through the first quarter, and it's compared against an annual goal. So let me just click on one of these and take you to show you what it looks like. So when you click on it, the link, it takes you to that given page or that given grantee's page within the broader dashboard itself. So you can see this is Partnership for Children. This is the Teacher Workforce Development Program. Brief overview of what the specific project's goal is. This one is to program and recruit and retain qualified early childhood teachers. The grant amount is $113,000, and you can see that for this particular program, there are 3 KPIs that we've identified or that we're measuring and reflecting in this given dashboard. So just quickly, you can see, looking at number of participants enrolled. So through the first quarter, there were 4 participants that were enrolled, and that's compared against an annual goal of 15. Now there's one other item in here as well that I want to share with you guys, and this is the link to the quarterly report template. So when you click on this is if you want to see more data. So this will reflect additional data or supplemental data as to what's reflected in the dashboard itself. So when you click on this, you'll download a PDF form, and you can open up that PDF form, and this is what it looks like. So this is the actual reporting template that is collected from the grantees that then is rolled up and synthesized into the dashboard. But this has some additional information in it for each of the grantees as well too. So you can see there's more than just three measures in this, and here's a kind of high-level summary of spending year-to-date as well too. Any questions?
Yes, what does KPI stand for?
Sorry, key performance indicator.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Any other questions?
It's terrific.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let me jump back to the presentation real quick. Okay, so those are just kind of overview of the program level measures and how we're going about capturing and the process we have in place for reflecting performance of the specific measures related to the given grantees. So when we talk about population level indicators, right, these are the macro level indicators that are a reflection of the broader activities around the fund umbrella itself. So as we work through trying to define what are the most meaningful and impactful indicators, we've had lots of suggestions, lots of ideas around what would be good reflections of that goal. The challenge we kept running into is, where's the data? Is there available data? And there were definitely some limitations around what was available from a data perspective. So we really had, I don't want to use the word constraint, but we were constrained, for lack of a better word, based on some of the ideas that we received. And we really had to identify measures that had definable data sources associated with them. So, long story short, when we take a step back, based on the available data, we feel we've defined measures that align to the broader initiatives of the fund, specifically related to availability, quality, and workforce development. So just quickly going through the list of measures here, you can see the ones that we've identified are number of licensed care facilities, number of licensed slots, quality star ratings, number of employees working in facilities, the pay rate for the workforce, and that's teachers and assistant teachers, workforce turnover percentage, and then student achievement towards school readiness. So just two quick kind of asides as it relates to those last 3 measures. The pay rates and the workforce turnover, the data source for those initially were a study that Partnership for Children had funded. And it's the most meaningful data that we've been able to find around those two specific measures. This is going to be funded or carried out by the state going forward. And hopefully, we're hoping that there's going to be continuity of this going forward. But I just wanted to raise the flag and say next year we may have some conversations around the continuity of the data in terms of what the availability is, assuming that the state will continue to conduct the survey that this data is based on. And student achievement towards school readiness, that data has been consolidated from the Asheville City Schools and the Buncombe City Schools. There's some unique challenges with that in that they both use different assessments. We've ultimately had to consolidate those into one value, which I'll share with you right now. So here are the baseline measures. You can see we've got data going back for the past 3 years for some of them. Some are just current state measures. For example, as I indicated, the wage rate and the turnover are coming from the workforce study that was conducted last year. We will have data for that coming up this year. And then the school readiness, there's some challenges with Asheville City Schools around getting historical data. So this is our first data point that we have, and we'll be adding to that in the coming years. These will be reported on an annual basis and consolidated there. And this is going to serve as our baseline going forward. Anybody have any questions?
I was
Comments?
just gonna ask about family child care homes.
Okay.
These are only centers, we can't get, I don't know if that's even available.
So I think we're living centers in the homes.
Pardon me?
Include centers and homes.
That's what it says at the top in the
Yeah, it's
plans.
consolidated.
You wanna see it split?
It says centers and homes.
Oh, okay, I was looking at the header. I think the header then should say centers and homes.
We could add a
Sure.
row and split them.
Splitting them would probably be good too, that'd probably be informational. Okay, I didn't see it in the parentheses.
And Leslie, I'm sure you noticed, but as family child care homes have become more licensed, they're now called centers in homes versus family child care homes. So just as an FYI from the vision,
Okay, nationally, I don't know that
it's
that's
a different
true,
distinction.
but, okay. I have another one, but keep going. Ian.
That's it. That's all I got.
So the school readiness, tell us about that. So the two systems use different instruments?
Yeah, that's right. So Asheville City and the Lab D assessment is kind of like a pass-fail. So it's either like a yes or no. It's very binary. Whereas Asheville City, there's 3 categories. They have like a gifted category. They're kind of like meets the baseline of standard criteria, and then they have like a fail. So in order to roll that up into one number, we had to consolidate those.
So 69% of what?
Of students that have been assessed have been deemed ready for their grade level.
Kindergartners.
Yep.
Entering kindergartners, don't they assess them after they've been in the classroom so many weeks or
That's
something?
right. Yeah.
So, I think it would be good, and maybe that's the only one, but I think we need to define what we mean.
Sure.
So
Yes,
69% are deemed ready by 2 different instruments. I mean, I think,
So some clarity,
Researchers-
maybe just a little extra language there.
Yeah,
I
that'll
think
work. Yeah.
it's, right, I think we need to be a little more scholarly and specific on that.
I'm hearing a lot of excitement and rave reviews in community chatter. This is really exciting to see this coming to life. Thank you all for the work on this. And the invitation would be for you all to dive in. If anyone needs support in kind of navigating it, Rachel, who might be a good point to
start with me and
Okay,
we'll
great.
connect with.
And then this we'll be getting sort of real-time updates as the quarterly reports come in, right? Yeah, very exciting. This
Quarterly.
is awesome stuff.
It's very nice,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great, well, let's quickly talk about next steps, and then we'll have time for public comment. As Rachel alluded to earlier, the committee decided that in January we would not have our meeting in here, we'd have a special meeting out in the community. Staff is proposing to us 2 dates, which are also the first full week of January, January 8th or 9th, and staff has suggested a late afternoon time as sort of being the best time slot to probably be as accessible as possible to the audiences we're hoping to reach. If we could get guidance from the committee on whether January 8th or 9th would be better for the majority of people, that'll give staff enough information to find a location and nail the time down. So again, we'll be looking at late afternoon of January 8th or 9th. And if folks want to take a moment to look at your calendar, we'll just sort of do a show of hands for which day is better for more folks, and then I can go with that day.
So what would the time frame be? How late would it go?
What are you all thinking?
It could straddle the 5 o'clock hour, or it could be beforehand, like 3:30 to 5, or 4 to 5.
Okay, then the 8th would not work for me, one person.
Is there a preference on time?
It would be, I've got an event at 5:30 back downtown, so. That we're before, we finish by 5.
Maybe like a 3:30 to 5.
Depending upon, unless you're putting it way out in the, way out. And I had traffic on the way.
We can brainstorm some locations that we've used for other community engagement sessions, but we would likely be looking at something central.
Who are we targeting, who are we trying to reach?
The goal here is to reach both potential applicants, folks who are wanting to learn more about the process, but also community members more broadly, including potentially families and advocates. But the goal really is to make this process as transparent, as engaged, as public facing as possible. Show of hands of who can do the 8th?
If it's
If it's done,
done.
if it's what?
It's done by 5.
It's done by 5? Okay. And show of hands of who can do the 9th? Looks like the 9th offers a little more flexibility with time.
Thursday the 9th?
Now, we also have that partnership for children. Visiting.
Right.
Does that work okay for people, or would you prefer to?
No, I think that,
Okay.
just pointing that out.
Great.
So we'll aim for January 9th in the late afternoon, stay tuned for details.
Great.
So then, what we have down here for our next meeting, that's not,
Cross it out.
cross it out.
Yep.
I think we.
So our next meeting will be January 9th, late afternoon, specific time and location to be shared by staff by email. And then I'm gonna suggest in the interest of time that our executive committee do some discussions around the February through April meeting sequences and content for that, and then bring that back to committee for to chew on. Any final comments relating next steps?
Can I ask a point of clarification? Do people that applied before that maybe look at multi-year grants, do they apply again using this new template?
Yes.
So everybody will apply again using the new?
Yep.
Okay.
Any final comments? Okay, then we'll open up public comment. Amy Berry has signed up to speak.
Thanks.
Amy, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks
seconds. I think the committee can.
Anyone can call, anytime who's a resident up for a week for committee members and for the public to look at. Some of these staff can incorporate easily without making a change, selecting, as we key it into the application.
Yeah.
Substantive changes, staff is not gonna make without circling back and getting to the meeting. And procedurally, if executive committee wants to talk about moving public comment to a different time of the meeting, we certainly can consider that. That was something that was discussed once before and could be revisited.
Okay, great. Well, if I might just kind of, I think that the spirit of many of the edits I heard was around clarity, precision, and particularly in those areas where it's the same term is used in different ways by different people. So it seems like as we move the editing process, clarity, precision, and maybe erring on the side of thorough explanations would be helpful benchmarks. Yeah, great. Clarity's always better, yes.
Can we give them the permission to kind of incorporate that, or do we have to vote on that again?
I'd like to make a motion that we incorporate or change this into the application, if we need that.
We can, I think procedure would allow us to, we haven't adjourned, so we're actively in meeting. I think procedure would allow us to revisit something we voted on earlier and potentially, there'd be a motion to reopen discussion on that item and then.
So moved.
Okay, second. All in favor? Okay, we're gonna reopen discussion on this item for further discussion and additional.
I'd like to
motions.
make a motion that we incorporate the changes.
Here are the items that I heard
Okay.
in the public comment that were different from overall questions or suggestions, added specific. Add definitions for types of care. Add the word advocacy to strategy 5 as an example. Make it clear that projects are asked to select one strategy. And reread the multi-year language and make it as clear as possible.
I have a question on the selecting one strategy. When I read those, projects may touch on multiple ones. Are we saying just select the one you think is most relevant and understanding you might touch on multiple, or do we
Yes.
want to give them a chance to select them all? Just
One
one, but
per will allow the committee to do some organizing during grant making that would be very beneficial.
Then I
And
would
someone
prefer-
could apply could submit 2 applications under 2 separate strategies, which happened last year.
I like what you just said.
I was gonna say, when I was reading it, I thought it might be helpful to say, recognizing that many initiatives will cross, strategies, please select the one that is most relevant to your project.
That's great wording.
I think with, with respect to the point Amy made about not everything is suitable for collaboration. I mean, if you're gonna build a classroom, there's not a lot of collaboration.
I was gonna hold
I
that
think-
separately, but yes.
Yeah, okay, well, I think we've got in our scoring, we would have to sort of,
Do we want, so those 4 are quick and easy, and I can make those no problem.
Plus second rooms, I think, so.
What,
The edit you had.
Yeah.
So the,
are
yeah.
you incorporating that one?
Amy and then, yeah.
So the second piece, do we want to revisit the scoring tool and or the presence of that question and consider collaboration differently than it's currently being considered?
However, if you are consistent in the way you score around collaboration, even if you gave it a 0 because there's no collaboration, I mean, I now take it back, never mind.
Well, let's stick with the first, is there a motion on the floor to accept the additional proposed edits? Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, those additional edits will be included. And then we're over time. Do folks want to go a couple more minutes and try to get some clarity on this? Okay, great. Someone want to try to push the ball forward to a suggested resolution?
Could there be a box like a not applicable?
So that it doesn't affect the score.
Right, if you click, if you check not applicable on the collaboration component, that would indicate that it,
If it's not
Collaboration not
something that we want to
required.
review on every group and assign points to, it should probably be moved out of the scoring altogether and down to the optional additional information.
I think that's-
I'll make a motion then that we move collaboration into the optional information, so it would be considered similar to a multi-year funding request, similar to other questions like that.
Can we have discussion on it?
Yeah, it's just a motion, it's a motion to keep us moving, so, yeah.
Because I think collaboration, it's all in your definition of how you frame it. And even in building a classroom, you're still gonna collaborate with others. There's no doubt about it. So,
I agree with that. I was gonna say, I'm not
I think
sure
if we
break
remove it,
down.
I think we're doing
one
a
of the
disservice.
things that we see with so many different not-for-profits doing so much work is people don't always think about potential collaborations. And I remember reading through the grants last year, thinking, even when it was building a classroom, there are ways that people were thinking about, okay, how am I gonna staff, who am I collaborating with to staff that classroom, or, ways, and we wanna really draw that out from people, and if it.
And encourage it.
And encourage it, right?
I think so too.
I would move to rescind the motion of changing
I
collaboration.
accept your friendly resistance to the motion. I'm not persuaded. You're so civil. Okay, do we
We have to
have?
have a second
is-
though on the rescission.
Is there a second on the?
I second.
No, I never got a second.
Oh, yes, that's
We
true.
actually, we inappropriately entered into discussion because we never had a second. Okay, we're off the rails of
Oh,
our
you didn't get a
orders.
second.
Yes. Okay, but in all seriousness, does the committee feel comfortable retaining collaboration as on the scoring matrix?
Yes, and I think we, as we get kind of our direction of how we score, I think we need to kind of all be on the same page, maybe have a discussion when we get to scoring about how we're interpreting that so that organizations aren't unfairly penalized by us not having brought information.
If collaboration's not appropriate, explain why. Add that to the description.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
I worry that might give them an out.
But if they're poor explanation why, then you give the zero. It gets the zero.
Yeah, you're still collaborating with others when you're building. I mean, there's ways that you can always collaborate. So it's not, I just think it's in an interpretive way, how you do that.
Is the committee comfortable with, we'll revisit this with particular attention as we head into the scoring process and have shared. Okay, great. Well, on that then, we will adjourn our meeting if we have a motion to do so.
Make a motion that we
Second?
adjourn.
Okay, great. All those in favor of